All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Vets in Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Will Curtis. I am joined by a fellow CCIM instructor. Super excited for this episode. Michael, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being willing to share your story.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Will. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so tell us, what'd you do in the service?
So in the service, I spent over 10 years in the Army as 8 of those years was as a Green Beret in U.S. Army Special Forces. So I was a weapons sergeant. I was enlisted. And I spent the majority of that time, well, all of that time in third group. As I was in there doing my time as a weapons sergeant, I deployed multiple times. And then I transitioned over to an instructor, which is a typical path for most people in that field. And that's where I decided to then step out. So I was an instructor for small unit tactics for just shy of 2 years before I had separated and went full time into real estate.
So was the goal real estate the entire time, or what that, as you're obviously tip of the spear, what led you towards real estate?
That's a great question. So I've always had that entrepreneurial bug. I've always wanted to do more, and I didn't like a lot of oversight, to be honest. So I wasn't always the best employee. Being a Green Beret, they do open up your left and right limits quite a bit. So I enjoyed that field. But even then, I still felt stifled. And so I started looking at all different kinds of things. I mean, as I'm sure most entrepreneurs have done, I was in an MLM at one point in time. I tried, just a myriad of things. And then I ended up buying real estate with a VA home loan. And I was a single soldier at the time. So I just rented out some other rooms to some of my fellow Green Berets. And at that point in time, I didn't know it, but that's coined as house hacking as a way to get into real estate investing. And that just kind of spiraled into this obsession over real estate. After that, I was doing, creative financing, subject to investing, wholesaling, lease options. And I just kept going and kept going. And once I realized the beauty of real estate is you can quite literally do whatever you want as long as you know how to structure and negotiate the deal. I was hooked at that point, and then it was just real estate from there on.
So what did those first couple of deals look like? I mean, obviously you started off, kind of doing the house hacking even before it had a name, but what did those first couple investment deals start to look like for you?
Yeah, so the first one was just the whole concept of the house hacking for me was just reduce my living expenses, right? And so I got it to the point where I was living, well, my mortgage was covered, and I had enough left over that my utilities were covered because everybody was pitching in. So I was basically living for free. And in the military, we get BAH as well and BAS. So I'm able to pocket quite a bit more now. So that was enough that in the beginning. As I started getting into the creative financing, because I mean, the military is great, but the military doesn't pay that much. We all know that. So the first couple of deals was very little cash in, not that much cash out. But when you look at the return on investment, it was significant because it was very little capital into the deal. So those first couple of deals were, subject tos. It was seller finance. It was wholesaling or assigning contracts. That was the majority of them. And it wasn't until, maybe about 8 months in, maybe even closer to 24 months, where I actually put a significant down payment on my the first deal where I actually put a significant down payment and got a conventional loan. The majority up to that point was creative. And in less than 3 years, I worked my way up to over 134 rentals, which is another conversation because it might have been a little too fast at the time, but a lot of it was creative.
So, tell us about the too fast, because that's not something we hear many investors say. Most people say they should have gone faster, they should have gone sooner. Why do you think that was a little too fast?
Definitely outpaced my ability to control it. So hindsight being 2020, if it was all in my backyard, if I could reach out and touch every property, I think it would have went a lot different. But I had went ahead and expanded into multi-states. And so I had third-party property managers that weren't properly vetted, construction projects that weren't properly monitored or looked after. And so there was just money spilling through the quality control aspect. Had I went a little bit slower and made sure just enough systems were in place to catch those things, I wouldn't have lost my shirt in a couple of those markets. Hindsight 2020, I ended up selling a lot of the portfolio, but looking back at it, and it wouldn't have taken much, but looking back at it, if I just slowed down just slightly just to make sure those foundations were in place, I would have performed a lot better.
That's fair, and I think that's one of the things that we don't hear often, is what didn't go well and the self reflection,
Right.
right? And I think that's extremely important. And I joke, it's almost like going back to the army and doing the after action report. What are my three up and my three down? What are the three things that went well? What are the three things didn't do well? And I think that's one of the things that I've still carried, from my time in the military. We just did a transaction. What went right? What didn't go right? Hey, we just finished the year out. What was the positive? What were the negatives? What can we improve on? And finding those skills. Have you found certain aspects of your time in the military, those skills or the training or maybe mindset, discipline that have carried on into your real estate career?
Absolutely. And I have to give so much credit where credit is due. There's so many things that the military ingrains in you that just carries on. After action report, we do it all the time. We do it quarterly as a mandatory exercise within the company. And even when I wrote a book called The Elite Investor, just explaining my story and the military approach to it. And at the end of each chapter is an AAR. So we find that kind of just repeating that same philosophy. The other thing is we do a lot of backwards planning. A lot. It's really the only way we plan. So we'll set out an annual goal. I mean, we have a 5-year, a 10-year goal, long-term goals, but they're all backwards planned into individual tasks for team members for the next 90 days. And we consistently come back to that as well. So those two, I would say, are the top of the food chain as far as what we really took away. But there's so many of the little things. One in particular, and I love this because, in the military, it doesn't really matter what profession you're in, but especially in the special forces, they think that we have the best equipment. Whatever the world thinks that we're equipped with jetpacks and laser guns and all that, and it's like not really. We've got some pretty old equipment. They're hand me downs, or we're deploying to foreign countries and we're using their equipment. And so the premise of it wasn't about the type or the quality of resources we had. It was about how resourceful we are. And I just love that mentality because I think that's what business is in general. It's just how resourceful can you be will determine your success.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and I think especially as you're starting off as an agent, you're broke. You don't
Yeah,
have the sphere that everybody else has. You don't have the resources, the tools, the equipment, that everybody else has. So you have to be resourceful. What are some of the ways that you found that, especially as you started it on the brokerage side, that you had to be resourceful?
well, my favorite one is marketing. I mean, think about how many agents come out and they believe that they have to, just on the residential side, it's easy. Well, even on the pay for Zillow or pay for CoStar or pay for something to get their first lead. We all know that. I mean, those are great tools. I'm not knocking them necessarily, but you don't need it to do business. You don't. Right. And so I think the resourceful part was the ability to go out and network, go to these, there's always real estate meetups in your local market. It might be investor focused, might be commercial focused, doesn't matter. Go to these meetups, make yourself known. Go to conferences, go out, kiss the babies and shake the hands. That right there, as far as being resourceful, you cut down costs tremendously when we think about client acquisition costs, and you build a foundation. When we talk about prospecting and building your warm sphere, when you have a good solid warm sphere foundation, marketing really only becomes an issue when you're talking about massive scaling. At that point in time, you can build a business that's self-sustainable if you have a solid enough foundation.
So at this point, you're more or less out of the transaction. You've got a team that's running most of your transactional business. How is that shift from solo agent into running a team? How is that transition there?
It's, I would say, probably the hardest thing is managing the people, managing the individuals, the personalities. Everybody has problems, and they're all really important. You know, that was the biggest struggle. So for the team aspect, I still have a business partner, and she was really good at the people side, and which allowed me to focus on the number side, which is what I do. And so, as we're looking at marketing, I'm looking at marketing conversion rates. I'm looking at average GCI. I'm looking at prospecting, all these other things. She was the one really kind of handling those relationships. So, as we start to scale, we went through several iterations of our business model. We started off with the traditional team model, which is we produce the leads, our team keeps a certain amount, and then you're going to keep a prorated piece of the commission. And that worked for a while, but what we realized was talent retention, very difficult. Our killers, our go-getters, they're like, dude, why would I pay you, 40% of this commission? I could go get it myself, which we agreed. So we then transitioned over to, because we're at EXP, all right? And so we transitioned more over to an informal team. So we get the rev share. If we do referrals, we give them, if we generate the leads, we still got a nice hefty split, but it's our referral fee. But then we just teach our agents how to go out and hunt. And then the cream just rises to the top. And once we did that, it became less about managing the people and it came more about empowering the ones who are actually going to do something about it. And that's when it really changed for us. And we started off with a team of about 5 agents, and now in that sphere, and we hold regular trainings and regular meetings, and now in that sphere we have over 120 agents.
Oh, wow. So at that point, now the advantage of EXP is the revenue share, those kind of things as well, right? So now you're getting a piece of the transactions that they're getting, and I guess how does that necessarily work, or how to change your business model from that point?
Changes it significantly because when we go back to the idea of marketing requirements, significantly less. Because now we can market and I'm out of production. My business partner is not. So she can handle all the deals that she wants to handle personally. But any other team level leads, we could just send them out as referrals, right? If we needed to. But we don't have to worry about trying to keep our overhead covered when we have multiple agents. Our fees are much less, all of these other things. So that is where the biggest, I guess, cost savings came in. From a revenue perspective, honestly, I mean, it's just common sense. If we have more commissions flowing through the company makes more revenue. However, this is higher profit margins, percentage wise, with a lot less stress.
Yeah. So would you, I guess now that you've gotten, all these agents, I'm assuming some of them are prior military as well, right?
100%. Yep.
Have you noticed any trends or anything that you've seen from prior military, that things that just absolutely says, hey, they're going to come out and kill it, or that they're absolutely going to fail?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I'll tell you because the absolutely fail part, that one might be hard to pinpoint for me on the nose, but for the ones who succeed are the ones who come out just swinging. I mean, they come out the gate. A lot of them are still they're doing the CSP program or the internship program where they can separate, and they're doing it in real estate. They have their license. They're knocking down doors. They're talking to people. They're not being shy about it, telling the world I'm in real estate. They're going to the classes. They're doing all of these things very aggressively. Typically those individuals 8 months in, they can stand on their own. They can stand on their own. And this happens time after time. We just had another guy, great guy, military. He got out about 7 months ago, and he is already speaking on stages at EXP about land deals.
Wow.
It's like what the hell, right? But that's the type of, I guess, mindset when we know when somebody's turned on. It's like they're good, they're good. But they could, in my opinion, they don't have to do it in real estate. They could do it anywhere, but they have the right mindset for it, and they chose real estate.
So it really comes down to mindset then, regardless real estate, accounting, underwater basket weaving.
Yeah.
It's that mindset that comes through. I think that I would agree with you. I think that's one of those massive things. So maybe on those that don't make it, I know you said it's a little harder to put that one on there, but are there any trends or anything that you see outside of they don't come out swinging?
Oh, that's a good question. Excuses. The
Mm.
person who keeps saying, for whatever reason, and I really don't care. I do not like excuses. They're not tolerated. But the person who says, well, I would have done that, but this, or I could have done that, but this, or I can't do that because. And those individuals typically continue to stay closed-minded and they never progress past a certain level, if even generating any income. It's the individuals who don't have an excuse and we say, hey, do this, and they go out and execute, even if. So I'll give you a perfect example. So we would track um, attempted contacts made. You know, how many people did you reach out to? How many people actually responded? Of those, how many appointments did you book? Of the appointments, how many did you actually get to sign a contract? And of the contracts, you know, how many closed? Whatever. We would track those conversion rates, and we would backwards plan with each individual agent. And we would say, all right, based on you wanting to close this many contracts at your average GCI, that means you need to make this many attempts to contacts. And we go all the way back, right? Standard stuff. And if we told somebody that you want to make this number, and we never cared what the number was, it could be a million in GCI. If you want to make this number, that's how many contacts you need to do. So you got two choices. Either try your bust your butt to get those contacts or get better at your conversion. Which one are you going to do? And then they would just be like, done. And they would walk away and they would execute. Others would say, there's no way I can reach out to 100 people a day. That just make an excuse. Or, well, I've got the kids and I've got this. Guys, we all got lives. I, we all got lives. Either you want to do it or you don't. I didn't set the goal for you. You set the goal. You said you wanted to make this much. I'm just telling you, based on your performance, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, I love it. I think I've seen a lot of the similar things, and as we've talked to other guests as well, we've kind of seen that as well. Is that really that gung ho? In the military, we call it high speed individual comes in. They're the ones that are going to go out there and do well, regardless. But I can see the same thing. If you're finding excuse, if you're finding other reasons not to do it, no matter where you go, it's going to be relatively similar outcomes, right? So you talked about training often, and that's kind of what your secret sauce is. Is there specific things that you think veterans, as they transition, should be looking at for training, and things specifically that they need to look at, or is it just the same thing that everybody else is going through?
So I love that question because when I transitioned out, there's one area that I struggled with immensely, and that was communication. Coming from the military, we speak a very certain way. You know, it's whether
Well,
it's politically correct or not, or it's very direct and it's very harsh, whatever. We speak a very certain way. Civilians don't like that. Other people don't like necessarily to be talked to that way. Where it doesn't bother us, it may really bother somebody else. So I'm just very grateful to have the people in my life at the time because my business partner pulled me to the side and she's like, Mike, if you keep doing this, people are going to leave. So I had to learn communication. And I actually went through a communication coach and other things. But when we communicate, it's not just about making sure that we kind of soften the edges. That's kind of a part of it. But in the military, we're used to using military jargon in our everyday lives. And for us, jargon is like that's the buzz to tell me if somebody knows what they're talking about in the military, right? So if you come to me and you're not using the jargon, I'm like, bro, do you even work here, right? In the real world, nobody likes jargon. You got to talk as if you're talking to a fifth grader. You need to make it simple because people, when they're confused, they don't buy, period. They have to understand. When they're confused, they feel like you're trying to pull something over, pull a veil over them. So it's how do we communicate our objective, our end state, but in a way that's not threatening, not abrasive, and very clear. I would just recommend that if veterans coming out just worked on that, then again, it doesn't matter what field you go into, you'd be more successful.
yeah, I would agree. And I think one of the things I'm telling myself now, the profanity was the issue, still an issue.
Still, yeah.
And you've got to turn it off. And you and I both teach, and there's a lot of times when I'm up there, I'm like, just don't say the F word, don't say the F word.
Mhm.
That's what's going in the back of my head because of the way that we communicate inside the military, and that's something that I think still 15 years later still struggle with the language or the quality of language that doesn't necessarily translate anywhere near as well. Um,
I would. That is one of the biggest ones. When behind closed doors, when I'm with my family, I can say what I need to say. And even now with my new son, I'm trying to be cautious of that as well. that's a very difficult one there for sure.
On the fatherhood side, I knew I had a problem when I was walking. My little one, well, my oldest daughter, she was walking up the stairs, and I said something, and she turns around, she looks at me, she goes, "What the?" And I look at her. I was like, call her by name, Lola. How dare you? What are you gonna say? And she looks at me. She goes, "I didn't say
Yeah,
out loud." And I was like, trying not to laugh, trying not to die,
right.
because I'm like, she heard that from me.
Yep, yep,
That's
yep.
where she heard it from. I can't get mad at her. I can't laugh, or it's going to encourage it more. But I know for me, that was the one point where I was like, all right, yep, I really gotta tailor this back, right? I've really got to work on my speech, not just personally, but professionally as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't know, it took me way too many years after the military to really grab that lesson. So, no, I can certainly see that. So, you've gone through and done CCIM and all that. Why did you choose to go that route?
Yeah, 100%. I actually started off, so, I mentioned I started off investing, then I got licensed. I originally got licensed as a realtor just to buy more investments for myself, to be honest. Then I just happened to find my business partner. We started the team and things kind of progressed. Because my background is investment and just overall, my background is a much more tactical approach to things. I look for the logic in the deal. I don't really care about the emotion. So I did a few residential deals and one after another, it had to do with the backyard doesn't it's not big enough for my dog, or this isn't the right school district, and all of those are fine things for other people. I didn't care. So I transitioned over, and at the time, although I was doing some residential as a for primary buyers, I was also doing residential as investments. I was selling duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and that would just made a lot more sense to me because I can run the numbers, I can present it to an investor, they could buy it, everybody's happy, and an investor for us was a repeat customer. So instead of me going out and getting 200 new leads, I just got to get 20 good leads who are going to buy 10 properties. So it made a lot more sense. So as I continued to go into it, my background is multifamily, and I started selling, apartments or 6 units or 12 units or 30 units or 50 units. And I was like, you know what? There's a designation out there that can help provide a little bit more legitimacy and teach me something that maybe I'm not aware of. And so I started looking around, and that's where I fell on CCIM. And so started the journey, and I was blessed because I used the remainder of my GI Bill after my MBA to get the CCIM for free. So I just pursued it, and yeah, the rest is history. I'm there with you now.
Yeah. So and why did you choose to go for the instructor side of things?
You know, I just, I think I love teaching, and I really have a passion for real estate and finances. As weird as that may sound, um, as a Green Beret, primarily what we do is we teach. We're called force multipliers, or we're referred to as force multipliers. You take a team of 12 individuals, we train up a military unit of 30 or more. So when we go in there, we're educating, we're training. That led to me being an instructor in the military for up and coming, Green Berets. And so with all of this, I realized that I enjoy teaching and seeing that light bulb switch. Even when I do a transaction, when I can provide somebody some insight and they're like, oh, that does make sense. Actually, yeah, that does work for me. It's like, all right, great. This impact didn't stop at the closing table. This impact now provided something that they can take and they can continue to invest and they can scale their legacy or their wealth or whatever their goal is. But to me, that's a really cool thing to think like, hey, I impacted somebody one time, whether they remember me or not, it could have been the seed that sprouted to something greater. So because I had that passion just all around and the opportunity opened up for a CCIM instructor, I just went and tried out. And I was blessed to get that opportunity to keep going down the path.
So now both teaching in the military, because I did the same thing, teaching in the military and then teaching as a civilian, have you noticed anything different with students from both teaching military and teaching civilians? With how they learn or how they approach things? Is there anything that just kind of jumps out as different, and maybe as a military veteran trying to transition, through what they may be able to expect from their civilian counterparts that may be going through training with them?
Yeah, that's a really good one too. So my mind's like flooding with all kind of differences. So let me just highlight two of them. One, let's talk about the style of instruction. So in the military, typically it's crawl, walk, run, crawl, walk, run. So we're probably a block of instruction that's classroom, and then there's some hands-on, and then we go repetitions, like until they get it right, for the most part. Um, and so with that, you can take somebody who doesn't know much about the concept, and you can get them proficient to the passing standard. Now, in the military, I think we're all aware that some people you just are surprised that they're there. You're like, "How did you get here?"
Breathing, hooray.
Exactly. And sometimes they're forced to be there. So it's not even of their own free will. It's like, hey, you're there. And as an instructor, I don't care what your background is. My goal is to make you pass. Now, on the civilian side, it's a little bit different instruction method or instruction style because a lot of times we can't really, well, it depends on what you're teaching, but we teach a more academic concept. So it's not very tactical hands on as far as here's a real deal. It's more of repetition of this problem set or whatever the case is. But what I have noticed, the second thing I noticed is that, we talked about some vets or military members don't even volunteer, but it's a mandatory training. And the civilian side, all of them are kind of volunteering, and with what we do, they're actually paying to be there. So their attention is a little bit different. It's like more intentful. They know that this investment will in turn make them more money. Whereas a lot of times in the military, depending on what we're training, sometimes they're never going to do it again after we train them. But they just have to get through the certification. So I think the approach to the student is probably the biggest difference.
Yeah, I can certainly see that, from that perspective. And as soon as you mention you're in the military, you're in a class. I can drive a 40 passenger bus, but I never did in real life,
Exactly.
right? I know how to do it. I passed the class. Never have I driven it, right? Was there a purpose for me? I think they were bored. And they wanted to get a bunch of us out of the shop because we're waiting for aircraft to come back from deployment, and send these guys to the bus driver course. Completely different mindset. Whereas I remember sitting through the CCIM classes going, "Oh wow, okay, I can use this. This is how I'm going to make money." Absolutely, that difference in mindset, and then again being voluntarily there. CCIM, I think the joke, it's 5 grand to letter. By the time you look at the cost to travel, the cost to stay someplace, it's not inexpensive. Putting that kind of investment in your business, 15, $20,000 into your business over a year or two or three, that's serious money that I think, not in the military, that sounds insurmountable. I mean, that's half your paycheck for,
Yeah.
for lower enlisted, that's half your annual paycheck in some of these, right? Putting that kind of money into something. So I can certainly see that difference there. Now you mentioned you're not necessarily in production as much anymore. What does day to day look like for you now?
Yeah. So the bottom line is now I run an accounting firm focused on real estate entrepreneurs. And it kind of progressed because as we were doing investment real estate analysis, syndications, and the complexity and the size of the deals began to scale, I had an opportunity to become a CFO for a small private equity company. And that PE firm focused primarily on hospitality assets. So boutique hotels, franchised hotels, things of that nature. So, doing that for a few years, that's when I realized that I love real estate and I love the numbers behind it, but I also love business. And these numbers, as I was in charge of my company's finances already, because my partner took on the relationship side, I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is the perfect union of the passion and skills. So then I started doing fractional CFO services for larger real estate investors, syndicators or anybody who had a decent portfolio. I would come in and do some fractional CFO services and put a lot of that skill set together. And as that continued, that started to scale pretty well. And I realized that there's still this issue. There's still an issue out there for qualified accountants who really understand real estate on a small level and on a large level. that understand the mindset, not just real estate tax law and the skills behind it, but what is the investor thinking? What's the day-to-day market actually doing? And so that's when we set out to create G2 Business Solutions. And now we've got a beautiful company that does all encompassing, all in one accounting. We have bookkeeping, payroll, tax prep, tax strategy, and the fractional CFO services. And our niche is real estate. We focus on the real estate community.
So, what point does an agent need to start looking at bringing in an accountant, bringing in, at a certain point, a fractional CFO? At what level do you typically see that your customers or these agents are starting to come to you?
Yeah, so the baseline is bookkeeping, and anybody who does more than 3 transactions throughout the year should probably get bookkeeping. And here's the primary reason why. Most of the agents that come to me, they come to me after the fact. Their bookkeeping is Excel or a box of receipts, and then they have sticker shock at their tax bill. And it's like, well, look, if we had bookkeeping and you were tracking all your expenses, I could have told you 6 months ago that you should put this much aside for taxes. So bookkeeping, bottom line, we help anybody who's just getting started with bookkeeping. Now on the CFO side, so it kind of tiers up, right? So we have the bookkeeping, then it'll probably be tax strategy next. And so if you're generating, let's say over 6 figures and you're afraid of that tax bill, tax strategy is probably going to be the next step. We might discuss forming an LLC, electing S corp. We might discuss having a self-directed or some form of a solo 401k. That probably gets most people over the hump next. Now, for the real estate entrepreneurs who are generating 7 figures or more, the CFO services really start to make sense, right? It really starts to make sense because we're not just at that point in time, we're going internal to your operations. We're reviewing your SOPs. We're looking at your metrics like revenue or profit per team member or per employee. And so typically you have a larger operation so that the quality of that service actually starts to make sense.
I think the sounds like the magic to what you guys are doing is that you've been the agent as a solo agent, you've been the small team, you've gotten the large team, you've worked with the investors, like you have been in their shoes.
100%.
I'm assuming made the mistakes, got the big fat tax bill, which I remember my first one that I really got when it was like 30 odd $1,000. I think I had to write a check. And I was so glad that I had put the money back. My wife, who was not with me when I started in third party sales, I went corporate for a while, then came back into third party sales. My wife was seeing every one of these checks come in. I was like, take a huge chunks, 30 odd percent for us, makes sense, 30 odd percent into a savings account. She's like, why can't we spend it? Why can't we spend it? And then when I got done with the taxes, I'm like, $38,000. That's why, dear, we've been holding this there. And then she's like, wait, we had more than that in the bank account. We did. Congrats. We got our tax refund. We just held on to it in an interest bearing savings account.
Exactly.
But had we not, it would have been a completely different story in those situations. I was lucky enough to have somebody guide me and coach me, but I'm sure you had the similar situation that, oh crap, I got to it's a painful check to write to Uncle Sam.
100%. And a lot of, like we just talked about, an agent comes out and they hit the ground running. It's not difficult to find success as an agent if you're really serious about it. And so if you go from a W-2 where everything's taken out, and now you've just generated anything over 6 figures, that tax bill is going to be hefty. We got federal tax. We got the self-employment tax that's what gets people. Then you got the state tax if there's that too. And so, just being educated on it alone can save you thousands of dollars. And typically what we end up doing is if you come to us and you don't know anything and you generated over 6 figures, we can save you thousands of dollars just off of simple stuff. But like you said, it's because we've been there. We understand it, right? That's the uniqueness of our firm is when I go out and when we search for talent, they got to have a background in real estate, right? So we got people. Our bookkeepers are investors. They own their own portfolio, right? Others are their spouses are real estate agents or whatever the case is. Their parents invested. So it's important. It's an important piece of the culture.
I love it. I can absolutely see the value of having somebody who is in the industry, understands the industry, sitting back and looking at your books, seeing it from a different perspective. And then even with that, even specializing, all you're working on as real estate agents, you're going to see what other real estate agents are doing, and you're going to see the mistake somebody else made and transition that over to me to make sure that I'm protected, because something changed the tax law or somebody's, 3 years ahead in their journey. You already know what that struggle is going to be.
Yep, exactly.
So one of the questions we ask to wrap up every interview is, if you were to look back at your transition, is there anything you would have done differently, or anything that you wish that you maybe didn't learn the hard way, that somebody who's kind of coming out and making that transition to today could miss that mistake and be further along faster than what you've been?
That is a great question. Um, so I'll get a little serious here, but transitioning out, even with the limited success that I had, was the absolute most difficult time of my life. And it's because at the end of the day, hindsight 2020, I realized that I lost purpose. I lost purpose there. So, being with the guys, going out and doing hard stuff, some of it, putting our lives in danger, but being able to be there was a purpose behind everything we did. When we trained, it was a purpose. When we taught, it was a purpose. And even though we had the companies, there really was no purpose except for not selfishness, but selfish items, more money or more wealth. And so when I lost that purpose, I got into a really, really dark place. And I've worked my way through it, went through all the counseling and everything. But if I had maybe a support network of veterans that I could just talk to when the dark times came, it would have allowed me to. And there was a point in my time where I just had to step away completely, and just like we all know, when you lose momentum, you start over from the beginning. And so, if I had not lost that momentum, I'd be in a better place now. I'm in a great place now. I'm not complaining, but that is something that blindsided me. And then, lo and behold, I had two other friends get out who are also in special operations, and they experienced the same thing. So I do feel like it's not just me on an island. I think it's something that most veterans don't expect.
No, I think it's exactly it. I had the same struggle. As we've interviewed, as many guests we have, we've heard this same story over and over and over, is that suddenly there's guilt, whether it be survivor's guilt, or I know for me personally, the next deployment, my guys got hammered. Felt guilty that they're there. I should have been there to help provide leadership. I had been in a different situation. So you feel that guilt of leaving everybody, but then, like I think you put it, lack of purpose. You're like, what am I doing? Why am I here? You don't have that bigger mission. And you know, great interview. We just took it down
Yeah.
pretty quickly, but it absolutely is true. And I think anybody that's going through that transition process, they should expect it. They should build that network, whether veterans that are out there, service members that are still in, because I think you're exactly right. It's a struggle many of us don't expect to happen, and it's a good year or so after you get out. It's going to hit you relatively tough, and it depends on where your resiliency happens to be. And we lose too many veterans, because of that time period. Finding that group to help keep you up, keep you going, and using those benefits of the VA gives us with mental health counseling, or religious figures or those kind of things. So absolutely. So, well, Michael, that was a great interview. I appreciate your time and you being willing to share with us. I'm certain, and I know your heart. If somebody has a question, you're gonna be more than willing to jump in and answer those questions and provide that guidance. So those of you that watched, if you found value to this one, by all means, feel free to give us a like, a share, a comment, send it to somebody that's out there. Michael's got a great story. He's doing a lot of things. You need accounting services. He's obviously there to help kind of sell those services as well. But he's done a lot, and I've gotten to know him as a CCIM instructor as we went through charm school together, which is CCIM instructors basic training. Go through that process and gotten to know him throughout the years. You couldn't do better with going to Michael for anything that's there. But thank you guys so much for the time, and Michael, again, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Will.